When I was 29 years old, I didn't really have any sense that I was overwhelmed. I was so disconnected from myself, I didn't even realize it. It felt very normal. So that low level hum of anxiety, I didn't even register it as anxiety. It was just my normal. And I didn't realize I was reactive and that I was snapping at people or that any of that. I had no self-awareness of that at all. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 29. When I went home for a few months to go through chemotherapy and radiation, it felt like a vacation. I felt calm. I felt amazing. And at that moment, I realized there was something that was not working in the way that I was living because I didn't realize I could have such a sense of peace.
Hello and welcome back to another Connected Conversation. So thankful that you decided to join us today. The holidays are right upon us. A lot of people feel anxious, stressed, overwhelmed, all the above. I know I do as I think about getting that perfect gift for somebody. This is our last episode of 2024. It's been such an amazing year on this show and in the community we've been able to build. More than 50 guests have joined the show over the 52 weeks this year. And we've had all kinds of topics, all kinds of breakthroughs, thousands of connected moments. Definitely check out our YouTube channel if you haven't yet. We just did a big overhaul. We've been able to break down each and every one of our shows into connected moments that we feel are going to be most impactful for your journey. To be able to just take that small step forward, that's typically the hardest step to take. And one of the things that you've done through joining this show is help me clarify and grow my mission, which is helping people more securely connect, not just through technology, but in the relationships we have, the activities that we do each day, being very intentional, and then taking that into your life, whether it's a business, whether it's something you're doing in your personal life that you love to do. All of these moments and lessons really lead to a better you. And as a part of that mission, I just released my second book, Cybersecurity for Everyday People, where we talk a lot about what I've learned on this show and how you can use some of these lessons to be more digitally secure. That's one of the missions I'm on, and it's really more holistic than just technology. And today's topic is really one of those key pillars that I talk about in the book, and we have a great expert with us today, Miss Dina Cataldo. Dina, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Greg.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So one of the ways we like to start the show, so the audience can connect with you a little bit, Dina, is what mission are you on? What are you hoping that each person listening in today, sitting with their coffee, eating lunch, kind of walks away with after the show?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my biggest thing that I want, and I love the fact that your show is called The Connected Mindset, is to help people reconnect with themselves. And I do that specifically with lawyers, but it is something that people who are driven so often disconnect from themselves and what they truly want and how they truly want to live in favor of the structures and the frameworks that they've grown up in and that they work within. And that can be devastating to our way of life. And one of the things that I talk about most is overwhelm, because in order to try to fit ourselves into these structured lives, we try to work ourselves to create the kinds of success that we want to create. When really, if we were just more connected with ourselves, we could create that success without overwhelm.
Mm-hmm. Yep. What does that process look like? I came from a world of legal technologies. That's how I got into my area of business in the world. And I know that I was absorbed into that, stressful minute by minute overwhelm of trying to solve problems, make everybody happy, keep things rolling forward. And there were high stakes. And I think a lot of people listening in today, they are in businesses of high stakes or their personal life. They're taking care of kids where they feel like it's, really high stakes if they make a mistake. And I think that creates overwhelm. So what do you see from people, and how do they reconnect with themselves, and where do they start that process being in a high stakes environment?
Yeah, I think the first thing that every single one of us needs to recognize is that what we want is important. How we want to live is important. Where we want to spend our time is important. Who we want to spend our time with is important. And if we just connect with ourselves, we will know who we want to spend that time with, where we want to allocate it. It's when we start living for other people that we begin to disconnect. We begin to deprioritize ourselves. Lawyers, for instance, and I know people listening, whether you're a lawyer or not, you probably tend to put yourself last on your to-do list. You're the last one to get dinner at night. Maybe you're the last person to, get anything for yourself, whether it's a workout, whether it's, taking care of yourself in some way. For, lawyers, it is, I'm going to put everybody in front of me, whether it's a client, whether it's family, and I give myself very little. But when you start giving to yourself, you start showing yourself that you are important and that what you want is important. So one of the things that's counterintuitive that I share with my clients is you've got to put you on your calendar first. And I get a lot of pushback from that because they feel so guilty. They feel as if they're doing something wrong. And for women in particular, although I speak to lots of men who are in the same position, they feel guilty about putting themselves on the calendar at all because they feel like they've got to prove something to themselves, to somebody else, or to take care of people in their lives. And they think that the only way to do it is at the detriment of themselves. But what's really happening is that you are actually weakening your capacity to do the work that you have already. You're weakening your capacity to build whatever success you want to create in your life. And you're weakening yourself as that energy source, because we're all energy. I mean, it's science.
Mhm.
We're all energy, and we're weakening ourselves as that energy source in order to help the people we want to help. So when you put yourself on the calendar first, you're showing yourself you're a priority, you're giving yourself that energy, and you are able to achieve what you want to achieve, whether you have goals to help other people, you have goals to, boost your revenue, whatever it is, you are able to do more because you're taking care of yourself.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that, put yourself on the calendar first, because it's hard for people to put themselves first because it makes them feel selfish.
Yeah.
And then you get called selfish. And then when you're putting other people first, you're selfless. I think a lot of us are navigating that selfish versus selfless equation. And I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think it should, I don't think you're either selfish or selfless. I think there's probably a fluid, I wouldn't say balance, but a fluid equation to it. How do you see folks kind of navigating, that equation of giving themselves to others, um, but also being a little bit selfish when it comes to putting themselves on the calendar first so that they can better serve the world around them?
Yeah, it's so fascinating. As you were saying, selfish versus selfless. I was thinking there's really no such thing as
Mhm.
either, right? We're just being in the world how we want to be. And we're either in alignment or we're not. So oftentimes we help people, but that helping of people is not selfless at all. We're doing it because we want them to like us. We don't want them to leave. We want them to think that we're amazing. We want them to be nicer to us. Like there's so much that we do in the world to show people that, look, we deserve to be here. That was me for a long time, an early attorney. Like I would work really hard. I would, stay weekends, late nights, because I wanted people to see how hard I was working. Because in the family I grew up in, when I got praise, it was because I was working hard, and that
Mhm.
praise, it felt very good. It felt very validating. I belong here. This is something that I'm meant to do. Like, look, I deserve a raise, whatever it is. So, even those things that we are doing in the world that we can label as giving, not always selfless, right? Because
Yeah.
we are trying to maybe assuage our ego or anything like that versus having a plan where, and I think it's, if I want to use the word selfless, it's even more selfless to prioritize what you want, because then when you show up in the world, you're not doing things because you want other people to think a certain way about you, or you're doing it out of obligation and resenting it later. You're doing it because it truly aligns with what you want, and the people around you enjoy that version of you and what you are giving. I see this in practices where, let's say, estate planning, for example, where an attorney who primarily works in estate planning will take all of these other cases that are referred to them because they want the referral source to like them, right?
Mhm.
They want the client to like them, versus saying, "Oh, I'm an estate planner and let me be giving in this moment and refer you out to somebody who specializes in that kind of work," versus trying to hoard the work and try to make them think that you're just this one-stop shop. And that's out of alignment with what you truly want, because what you truly want is to be an estate planner. So it's important that we observe what we want and make that important, because then our life just feels easier. And we're
Mhm.
more giving in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I love how you went back to really what the root issue or obstacle is understanding your core values, understanding what you actually want. I think a lot of us are navigating the world, and that those wants change, and we don't catch ourselves in the moment where we're burning ourselves out, or we're getting so overwhelmed that we can't think our way out of a paper bag, like some people say.
Right.
What did it take for you to get there, as an
Oh,
attorney?
wow.
And what was, like, I'm sure there are many light bulb moments along the
Yes.
way, but what was it for you? Was it tiredness? Was it you knew you were overwhelmed and you were like, this is not right? What did it take for you to kind of get there to say, I need to help other people do this because I've
Yeah.
been on the journey?
It took quite a few light bulb moments. It was not just one, but I will share that when I was 29 years old, I was about 3 years into my practice as a criminal prosecutor, running trials, working late nights, weekends, I mean 50, 70-hour plus weeks, and I didn't really have any sense that I was overwhelmed. I was so disconnected from myself, I didn't even realize it. It felt very normal.
Mhm.
So that low level hum of anxiety, I didn't even register it as anxiety. It was just my normal. And I didn't realize I was reactive and that I was snapping at people or that any of that. I had no self awareness of that at all. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 29. When I went home for a few months to go through chemotherapy and radiation, it felt like a vacation. I felt calm, I felt amazing, and at that moment, I realized there was something that was not working in the way that I was living, because I didn't realize I could have such a sense of peace. And I wanted to bring that into my law practice. I had no even idea that coaching existed. I didn't know any of that. So I really went on this journey of trial and error of, okay, I feel horrible, I feel good. I feel horrible, I feel good. What makes me feel good? What do I not like? What do I want? And I started doing that piecemeal. Things like yoga started entering my life, and I practiced that. That helped me get some self-awareness, because when you're doing mindfulness practices of any sort, you can't even help but get something from that. But then I started just doing a check-in with every area of my life. For example, when I share a lot is that my morning routines felt horrible. And I said, "Okay, well, where do you feel the most anxiety right now? That shaky feeling, it's in the morning. I'm hitting snooze about a dozen times before I get up. Then I'm rushing and I'm getting to work and I notice that when I'm driving to the office, I've got a little bit of road rage happening and I don't like that and I feel like I'm hitting the ground running as soon as I wake up and I don't like that feeling." And I said, "Okay, well, what do you want to do about it?" And so I started doing kind of a scientific experiment on myself. Well, what do I want my mornings to look like? What would I like to do? I'd like to sit. I'd like to have a cup of coffee. I'd like to maybe write something in a journal, but I want some time to myself in the morning. And then I just went about the work of, let's try this. Does it work? Yes, it does. Oh, I need to go to sleep earlier. And just that trial and error of how I wanted to feel during one particular time during my day. And so for anyone listening who wants to try this on for themselves, what's that one time of day or that project that really you notice gives you the shakes? You're feeling anxious, you're feeling stressed around that time of day. Figure out what that is and just pick that one thing to work on and do those questions for yourself. What do you want it to look like? How do you want to approach it so that you don't feel that way? And that's how I started doing things. And then later on, I started to do things maybe, I'd add in some mindset. I didn't realize what mindset was at the time. And now I know, oh, I had a different mindset when I was thinking like that, that allowed me to unravel the habits that I didn't want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the trial and error is so important. I think a lot of people think about transformation as black and white, where it's, I don't like this about this, and now I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and do these things. And it's not as clean cut as that. So, so a lot of people make these big promises and they don't give themselves the room for the trial and error to feel through it.
Yeah.
Mindset is how your mind's shaped and the way you're thinking. But one of the things we like to do on the show is really connect the mindset to the potential feeling that they're going through and
Hmm.
what it looks like in reality versus, you have all of these great mindsets that we bring onto the show, and all of a sudden when you walk away, you now have all those mindsets and your life just drastically changes all of a sudden. And the trial and error is just so important. And I think we're all going through trial and error in those different areas of life, but it's just taking that small step, like having that cup of coffee, not hitting the snooze. Maybe you hit it only once instead of 12 times.
Hmm.
So I think everybody listening in just, needs to connect to the fact that it is trial and error. It's not I'm now going to do this whole new routine and it's going to work
Right.
that clean every single time.
Right. And I think that's so important to notice because for driven people, we tend to be perfectionistic. So when we take on a new thing, let's say it's a new workout routine, right? It's upcoming new year. People want a new year, new you, right? So you're going to the gym, you're like, okay, I'm going to work out 4 times a week and I'm going to, just do it every single time after work. It's going to be perfect. And then they miss a workout and then they beat themselves up about it. And then they say, you know what, whatever, I'm done. And that's why so many people quit on themselves, is because they don't recognize that it's a process. And to recognize, I had this come up with a client recently. She had a similar goal. And I said, okay, how do you feel about that? And we explored what her mindset was. And I said, okay. And she had skipped some and she was being down on herself. And I said, okay, well, what do you think about twice a week? What do you think? Does that feel doable to you? Because when we take on these mountains, we have to recognize we've got to take the first steps. And if you don't say, okay, well, what is going to be easy for me to incorporate in my life now and something that I can get my mind around doing now, you won't be able to accelerate your progress because you will tell yourself when you miss something, that like miss a workout, that you're going to fail. There's no point. Look at me. This is what I do every single time. And that voice, that mindset is going to deteriorate your confidence and your trust in yourself. So my offering to anyone listening to this who has that going on is to say, hey, you know what? Baby steps. I'm allowed to take baby steps. And when you do that and you give yourself that permission, things become easier.
Mm-hmm. They really do. Yeah. It's like it becomes a little bit effortless because we're giving ourselves the grace to take the small steps. I think it's gotten popular nowadays. I think Andrew Huberman talks about it. Joe Rogan is, if you want to run, just go outside and take like a couple steps, then go back inside. Just
Yeah.
put your shoes on, or if you want to drink a gallon of water every day, wake up and just take one sip. And I think that's so important, because if we hold ourselves to the I need to drink a gallon of water before 11 a.m. and then we don't do it, then we revert back to that negative mindset perspective, and it's that infinity loop that we get on negativity. And then you're at work and you don't do things perfect, which a lot of us want to be perfect,
Mhm.
and then we keep going further and further down into the quicksand.
Yeah. I think it's also important to notice that our brains have a negativity bias. And so when we notice the things that are not working, there's also a real primal subconscious at play there, right? Because we used to be looking for danger all the time, looking for problems, looking for all of the ways we need to survive. And somewhere along the way, our brain kept that adaptive behavior, and we just start looking for problems everywhere. I'm not good enough at this, I'm not good enough at that, versus recognizing yourself for what you have accomplished. So if you did go outside and you went for a walk, say, hey, you know what? I went out for a walk. I didn't do that last week, but look at me. I'm moving forward today. Like really celebrating yourself to help you counteract that negativity bias so that you can stay in a mindset that allows you to keep going and keep moving forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. What does overwhelm look like for people? Like, and what should they look out for in the feeling? Because I think
Mm,
we've all been there at different levels, and
yeah.
we know when it comes on. Oftentimes, I think we push it down, and that's kind of
Yeah.
the depression, where you're really pushing down all of the feelings that are there, but we don't have time, or we don't have the energy to address it at that moment. So it just adds up over time. What should people listening in today look for when it comes to, I know I'm overwhelmed and I know this feeling, and I
Mhm.
need to do something about it before they hit kind of the rock bottom proverbial moment?
Yeah. So the very first signs that, you'll probably notice, these are definitely things I noticed when I felt overwhelmed, is I can't focus. I have this sense that I need to do everything all at once, as if everything's a big project and it all just has to get done now, because I'm feeling like all the work's coming at me and that I need to somehow get it under control, like wrap my arms around it and get it all done. And I also looks like procrastination. It can be doing things aren't really that beneficial to your work, like checking emails 100 times a day versus taking on that project that if it got done, it would make a big difference in how your workload look, right? So those kinds of things are what to look out for. And the very first thing that you'll notice in your body is a tightness. If you start paying attention, you'll notice tightness. Maybe it'll be in your shoulders. Maybe you'll notice that your shoulders are a little more hunched forward, that you have shallow breath. Maybe you notice that you have tension in your jaw or you get a headache. Like those are the different symptoms, so to speak, of overwhelm so that you can be aware of it. And once you're aware of it, that's when the magic happens. Because if you don't have awareness, you can't do anything about it. You're just stuck in it.
Yeah, those are very tangible. I know I've been there multiple times where I'm trying to create the environment and the actions around me, but it's
Hmm.
like, darts are being thrown at me and I'm trying to catch them all, but I only have two hands. And
Yeah.
it's almost like a feeling of, you just want to crawl into a ball in the corner and just say, please stop. But we have to do that internally, because the world's not going to stop throwing things at us. We have to have the practices, the breathing, to be able to slow things down a little bit. And I think a lot of people, they know that, but when they get in that moment, it's like, I need to take action. I need to keep
Yeah.
checking things off of the list, or I need to, keep responding to email or keep checking it because I don't want to miss anything. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of us get taken over by that crippling feeling, which it really does. It cripples us. It impacts us from taking the action that we really want to take.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because, I teach lawyers time management, and the very first thing that I teach them is, okay, when you plan every single week, and here's how you plan. You write a list of what's going on, but you only do it for 20 minutes because they could spend 3 hours on the list, right? So you're going to get the most important things down in 20 minutes, trust me. So when you get those items down, what they want to do is they don't even want to write the list. What their brain tells them is this is a waste of time and that I need to just jump into the work. But what happens when you just jump into the work? You're reacting from overwhelm, and then you're doing the things that are the least valuable in your business. You're doing things that are going to take you away from that feeling of overwhelm, if at all possible. That can look like eating, right? So overeater, or if you work from home, you go to the fridge a million times a day just to see if anything different has suddenly appeared in there, right? To distract you. You do things that, maybe I'll go clean, maybe I'll go bake. As I had one client who is a baker. And so when she felt overwhelmed, she'd bake because then she could tell herself she was doing something, right? If you're doing something in your business, even if it's not valuable, you can say, well, look, I'm productive. But it's really a load of baloney we're feeding ourselves because we're not doing what's the needle mover in the business to move us forward in a way that is going to help us combat, calm down the overwhelm overall in our practices. And so my work with them is really around retraining their brain. So when they feel overwhelmed, to say, oh, this is a normal part of the process of me learning how to manage my time. And the very first step for me to do is to take 15, 20 minutes to write everything that's on my brain around what I need to do. And then that's the first step. That helps you really calm it down. And then you get to go through that list and you start saying, what's the needle mover? What are the things that are going to be the biggest domino to help me move myself forward? Where are the deadlines? And you circle those. And that's when you can start moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something my therapist taught me when I was getting into my business was, and I wish I had advisors earlier that would have told me they learned that in
Mm-hmm.
their business. People that have been in business for 20 plus years, and they might not even still do it. And when my therapist mentioned it, and I started to write these things down that were going through my head, I now had clarity to actually think clearly enough to make decisions versus just trying to crunch the data in my head, making decisions, and then it led to the next decision. And it was a constant revolving anxiety and pressure to keep solving a problem that was
Yeah.
probably never going to be solved unless I put it on paper and saw it, because I'm a visual learner.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if you've seen anything different between men and women when it comes to overwhelm, how it pops up, if there's anything that those two groups should look for um, when it comes to the differences between the two, because I think we try to normalize overwhelm, like it's going to feel the same for everybody. So we almost look in our outside environment, like I look for females on my team. Are they gonna show stress the same way I am? And if I approach it that way, I'm probably not going to recognize when they've reached their limit, because it may show up differently in my life. So I'm curious if you've seen anything, whether it's with lawyers or just in your other coaching engagements, difference between how overwhelm shows up for men and women, if there are any differences.
It's not for the people that I've worked with, it's not so much a gender difference. It's not even a monetary difference, because you could be making $250,000 a year in your practice, or you could be making $4 million a year in your practice, and you could feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So it's not as if that even plays a difference. But I do think that when you have been hustling and working in overwhelm up to $4 million, you are now in such a survival mode that it makes it a little more challenging to allow yourself to let go of the reins, because now, instead of working from fear that you can't make it and you need to prove things, now you're in fear that you're going to lose it.
That's it. Yeah.
And it's really interesting observing that, because that's the time management is just a fundamental aspect of business. And when you really think about the people who are the most successful, they are the most successful because they know how to manage their time. They're not reactive. They have boundaries. They're able to communicate their needs. They're aware of what their needs are. They give themselves what they need, whether it's sleep. Like, I know people who are making lots of money who are sleeping very little, and they're sleeping very little because they're afraid that if they're not working every moment of the day, that they're going to fall further behind. And the truth of the matter is that they just need to sit and recognize where they are giving their time away freely. And there's nothing wrong with them. This is something that's normal, and they've normalized it through the work that they've done. And honestly, our society can be twisted in so many ways where we really believe that if we make more money, if we have a bigger house, if we have nicer cars, if we, have our kids at the best schools, that somehow we are, the I don't know, the best of the best. We're successful, when the truth of the matter is a lot of times people who we visually see seem to have it all are really hurting in the inside. So that would be the biggest difference I see, is that it can be more challenging when you're afraid you're going to lose something, to change your ways. And it's more essential because you will kill yourself. Like, you can grind up to $4 million, but if you are doing that, you're really hurting your nervous system, and you will need to let go of the reins to some extent so that you can move forward healthfully. And if you want to grow and continue growing in a healthful way, you need to have that stability, that foundation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it sounds like a lot of it comes back to that self-control component of being able to regulate yourself. And I think that's
Mhm.
the that's the intrinsic versus extrinsic value of which one do you value more. And I think a lot of people today, because of social media, because of just the world that we live in, and how kind of artificially connected we are, everybody is more prone to the extrinsic value, where it's, I have the car, but I'm, $1 million in debt because I spent, I got all the debt, I got all the credit cards I could to get the car, to get that extrinsic validation. And then I need to, start paying it off. But people don't, you don't get value back unless you have that intrinsic value that's really, I want to serve people for this purpose. And maybe you get a little bit of extrinsic value. And I think that's so important. And that's the world that we live in, and we're all trying to navigate. So it's not just one or two people trying to navigate this just as business owners. I think it's
Mhm.
everybody.
Oh, for sure.
Mhm.
100%.
Yeah. What have you seen as the, biggest breakthroughs as people go from time management to actually
Mhm.
implementing it,
Mhm.
to getting to that? The biggest word that is spoke on the show is clarity. To get to
Mhm.
those moments of clarity where they have the time management in place, they're now a little bit more self-aware. They have the self-control they need to not feel like every day they wake up and say, I'm going to lose everything, so I need to
Mhm.
do something that's way outside of my capacity, and
Yeah.
push myself to the limit. What do you see as the biggest breakthroughs after that kind of foundation's established?
Yeah, after they have that foundation, I mean, this is real recent for me because I've been talking to my clients. It's end of year. We're doing lots of reviews and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And, one lawyer told me this was the first time in 10 years that he'd planned a vacation and wasn't worried about work taking over. Because he'd created those boundaries, he learned to say no and be uncomfortable even when he said no. And like, I am on vacation during this time. I am not going to be available. And I had another client who just came back from Italy, and she spent, I think she was there 8 days, and she said everything was taken care of. I came back and my clients were happy, and everything was taken care of by my assistant if there were any little things, but she has learned how to manage her time in a way where she isn't afraid to put things out further. If client doesn't, client might have a need, but is it an urgent need, or are you just telling yourself that it's urgent? So then she can actually have those honest conversations and say, my time is booked until January 15th or February, whatever it is. I had another client, and this is all vacation because it's like lawyers are known for not wanting to take vacation. They're scared to take vacation because they're going to work anyway. They're going to come back and they're going to have more work than they ever dreamed possible, right? So another client, she went to Australia for 2 weeks with her daughter. She didn't bring her laptop, she didn't do anything, and she'd never done that before. So those are the kinds of things that are possible when you manage your time, when you really start to recognize that what you want is important. Because so many of the people I talk to really value experiences. They value experiences with their family, they value experiences with their friend. A lot of times that's travel. And you can't do those kinds of things if you're not managing your time. If you're not looking, right now it's 2024, we're going into 2025. If you're not looking at your calendar now for the time you want to take off next year, then by the time you want to take time off, it's going to be too late. So if you put that time on your calendar now and hold it precious to yourself because you value that time that you can have that experience with whomever you want to do it with, then you will be able to say no. You'll say, you know what? I already have that time blocked off. I can't do that. And you hold that time as precious to yourself and you recognize that what it is that you want is important. I think that's really the biggest thing that I've heard too, is that when you start recognizing that what you want is important, then it's easier to say no.
Yeah.
It's just easier.
Mm-hmm. What a freeing feeling for multiple people to come back and say, I can now do something I know is great for me and is important and not feel like I'm falling behind. I think that's the feeling we all get in falling behind. And the few examples I had growing up of entrepreneurs, business owners, people who are high achievers and doing great things in the world was on vacation, with the earpiece, still talking to people, the kids are wanting to go play, or, the significant other or the friend wants to, go do something, but you're still on that call and you can't do that, in a loud area. So you're missing out on experiences. So that was a mind frame I came into business with. And obviously being in cybersecurity, always anticipating, just like a lawyer, an incident coming up, or, somebody has an urgent, matter that arises. And that's just a constant state of stress and anxiety,
Yeah.
which none of us want. And I think an important aspect that you hit on is positive examples of that. And I think we're all looking for, whether it's a mentor or we're looking in the world on social media for people that are doing something similar to what we're doing and doing it the way we know it could be done. But there's just so many, I guess, not as good examples, because people are kind of giving off the I'm always busy, I'm always grinding, and
Mhm.
that's the only reason I have what I have, or have the life that I have. But you don't see the surface level stuff of
Mhm.
when they're actually enjoying time with their family, because that's when they're unplugged. So it's
Mhm.
giving a false sense of you have to be, this person that's making videos all day, or you're on the phone all day, or you're doing things that are stretching yourself to your capacity.
Mhm.
And you're representing one of those great examples through your work and the explanations you're giving on how people could actually go out into the world, look for people that are doing it and unplugging, and that those are things that people can follow in a positive light versus kind of conforming to this busy business culture that we have today.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I think you too. I mean, you're showing up in the world providing this platform for people to see, like, look, there's another way of living that's possible. And one of the things you talked about, and I think is one of the biggest objections to doing what we're talking about here, is what you just shared, which is, but there's always emergencies. There's always something that pops up. I have no control over that. And when you start telling yourself, and I did this for a long time. So when I say this, it's not judging anybody here, is that, but when we start telling ourselves we have no control over things, then we abdicate all responsibility for our time, all responsibility for how we're running our business. And the biggest way I see this happen is when lawyers tell me I'm always having an emergency pop up. And yet, if you always have an emergency pop up, you can plan for that, right? I'm always having a closing at the end of the week. Oh, okay, great. That's great news. So you know you need to give yourself more time, more grace at the end of the week so that you can manage that time and help that client. Or, oh, your kid is always going to throw a tantrum on Tuesdays. Perfect. Then you can give yourself more time in the morning so that you can manage your kid in the morning, right? Like, it doesn't matter what's going on, right? So this was a few years back where my mom went through, she had to be hospitalized, and it was like she was 2 weeks in the hospital, and I was doing everything I could to manage my mind in that period of time. And that is not something that's planned, right? A family member in the hospital for 2 weeks. And so I just looked at, what do I need to do so I can show up the way that I want to? And that's something that we can do every single week. And so what that meant for me was saying, all right, well, I am going to not have any calls. I am going to continue things out. I am going to give myself what I need to have some peace, which meant yoga and getting my hair done, which, I'm not going to lie, I felt totally guilty not being at the hospital every waking moment with my mom. But because I took care of myself, because I went on walks and did those things, I wasn't a hot mess for my mom when I was at the hospital, right? So those kinds of things are real things that happen. We do have emergencies, but when we tell ourselves we don't have control, we feel powerless, and we do not take the reins of our life, and we do not make the changes that we need to assist us in being the person that we want to be and aligning ourselves with the life we want to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned it extremely well, that it doesn't matter when we do it, it's the fact that we do the action that we know we need to do. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people are like, oh, I have to, work out in the morning, or I have to make sure I get all my closings done at the beginning. And then you let go of that control because it's, happening when a transaction needs to take place. So kind of giving yourself the grace to do the action, not necessarily when you feel it should be done, but when it can be done. And I think that goes back to the time management and actually putting it on the schedule and kind of knowing what the flow of your life is, and then scheduling it versus saying, this is the concrete way I want my life to run, and there's going to be nothing outside of that pops up. And I think that creates instant overwhelm and instant nervous system flare up because we didn't plan for it, but
Right.
we're trying to push it away, and we're losing control of that kind of sense of, I have control over my life and I can make the decisions. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's somebody else doing the closing then, or like you said earlier, you reference it to somebody that loves doing closings on Friday,
Yeah.
as opposed to trying to do everything at once, just because that's what seems right.
Yeah. And it also, I just want to bring us back for this, because I see this all the time, is once you start planning and then some emergency pops up, we tend to get into that perfectionism when we say, well, I couldn't do it because this thing came up, versus saying, oh, wait a minute, I just decide what my priority is. And then I move the thing that's not the priority. That's it. That's all that's happening. And I have clients who do this and have learned this mindset, and their life becomes so much smoother because then they just say, oh, I'll just move that. Oh, I had 3 hours planned for that. That's okay. I'll move that to Monday because I had a closing on Friday. That's okay. And then it eliminates the drama, which is such a drain on the energy when we're so hard on ourselves and we tell ourselves like, oh, this is just not possible. Or, oh, I didn't do that thing. That means I'm a horrible person. I'm a horrible lawyer, whomever, whoever's listening to this, right? Fill in the blank, right? So then you are not allowing yourself the grace to say, oh, no, I planned. It's just I decided to prioritize this other thing. And when we say I decided, then it feels so much powerful than, oh, I couldn't do it because this emergency came up. It's like, no, you just decided that that thing that came up, that was more important than what you had on your day on Friday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like you can't choose what happens around you. It's how you process it and how you make sense of it. And I think that's so important to transition, because we're all going through these micro transitions throughout the day, or we're going through big life, transitions that are taking place. And that's one of the traits I've seen great leaders have, is that ability, like you said, to transition effortlessly or flawlessly, whatever word you want to put to it. And I'm curious, if anything else from the ability to navigate transition effectively has come up, whether with your clients or in your own personal journey.
Yeah, I'll talk about myself for this one, although I know this applies to everybody. Is I have micro transitions throughout my day. Okay, when I woke up this morning, I set everything up. I like to have my coffee. I did my, infrared sauna this morning. I did those things because that sets me up. I did my walk, like that sets me up for my morning. And then, I'll do a little bit of work. And then right before I came on with you, I had, this opportunity to just kind of sit, take a few deep breaths, do that to regulate my nervous system so that I can come in and talk to you and be present, right? Because I think that's one of our biggest challenges is not being present. And that's a big part of it is us not taking those moments throughout the day for these transitions. And then after this, I'm going to probably have another glass of water. I'm probably going to, do something, walk around, do something, and then I'm going to come back to my desk, right? So I am going to do something for myself to recenter myself depending on what I'm doing through the day. Now, for the people who are saying right now to themselves, look, I don't have time for that. It must be nice to be able to just walk up and get up and walk around. Yeah, okay. I hear you. I have back-to-back meetings all day. I hear you. Okay. You've got to give yourself something if you want yourself to perform at your best. If you're not giving yourself your best, you're not going to perform at your best. So if you're doing back-to-back meetings and you're not giving yourself time to write notes about the meeting, to go to the restroom, to grab a glass of water, you are in charge of designing your life so you can have that. If you want to perform your best for your clients, then you've got to rejigger your schedule, which is what I've had to do to figure out like, oh, okay, this doesn't work for me. This will work for me. And that's what I've done over the years. So it's not overnight. But if you notice yourself rushing from appointment to appointment, do you want that? Right. And then ask yourself, what can you control to create those transitions for yourself? And that's really something that has been big for, a lot of the lawyers that I talk to is when they start to recognize, oh, wait a minute, I could have a 50-minute meeting instead of a 60-minute meeting and give myself 10 minutes. Or I could just have meetings on 2 or 3 days a week. I don't need to have them spread out all through 5 days a week. I mean, I can tell people that I only have consults on XYZ days. When they do that, it's so empowering because it gives them space to have the transitions so that they're not rushing around. And then it gives them focused hours on other days to complete their work.
Yeah, that's a breakthrough. I think that's realizing that you don't have to align with the societal norms, like the 9 to 5, the things that society has said are correct and the way to do it. I think that's what burns us out because we lose control of everything. What we've done at Valor is we don't have meetings externally on Mondays and Fridays, and it's just something that we tried throughout the whole year. It worked out. We had a couple clients that said, I noticed you guys don't have slots on Mondays and Fridays, and that's our ability to get our house in order to make sure we're knocking everything out. So when we get to those Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday meetings, we're prepared, we're ready to go. Obviously, if something comes up, we have that flexibility to respond, but it's not meetings starting at 8 in the morning and then getting over at 6, and then we don't have any time to respond. So we're always behind. So
Yeah.
you have to challenge those norms in order to get your life, what I feel like, in order, and kind of feel
Yes.
like you have more control, which is going to give you more solitude and make you be able to better connect with the world around you, which is what we're all about.
Yes. And I see a lot of lawyers who moved from working in a firm where you see a lot of lawyers who are working all night, they're working weekends, they're answering their email at strange hours, like they're not going to the bathroom so that they can bill more hours. I mean, you see that. and then they leave and they start their own business, and then they start bringing in habits from their firm, even though they decided they wanted to start a new business because they didn't like how their firm worked. So it's important to really become aware of what you do and don't like, and then start to tweak things so that it works for what you want. Because the more you do that, the more you're going to enjoy what you do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's what we all want. I think that's something everybody wants, is we want to enjoy our life. We want to enjoy our business. We get into business so we can have more enjoyment. And most of the time it's less enjoyment because we're letting the business run us versus running the business. And I hear that a lot. And I've felt that throughout my business career. So a couple things that have stuck out, understanding that what you want's important. Doing that hard time management. I think a lot of people hear about time management, but when it comes down to it, you actually have to put yourself on the calendar first and then schedule things, but have the ability to transition throughout. And I think that transition muscle is something that we have to train. We have to be intentional about, which is so critical. Any other key lessons that have stuck out throughout your life? And
wow. Well, that's a big question, but I will say that a key lesson for me, and I'm still learning it, is being more present. Being more present with what I want, being more present with the people in my life. So, in other words, I'm looking at them when they talk to me, or if I'm going out with somebody, I'm not looking at my phone. Right? It's that matter of how can I be more present in my life? And we have a lot of chatter. So for instance, I can go on a walk and it's perfectly quiet outside, but my brain starts thinking about things and I have to bring it back. I bring it back to my footsteps, the sound of my footsteps, the sound of my dog's paws on the cement, those kinds of things to help me become more present. And when I do that, not only do I feel more at peace, my mind is more clear, and I'm able to make the transitions that we talked about earlier easier. I'm able to feel more energized to do the things that I want to do. I am thinking more clearly about my priorities. So I might, if I wasn't doing that, start doing something totally unrelated to my goals for the day and then lose track of time. But if I'm present, I can remind myself when I see that happening, oh, hey, look at your calendar. What did you have planned for today? And then I can just move more smoothly through my day. So I would say the biggest lesson of my life is simply to be present. And it is something that I have gotten better at, but by no means am I perfect at it. But when I am doing it and I'm practicing it, I feel so much better. That is a big game changer in my life.
absolutely. Yeah, huge supporter of that. And it's not a perfect equation. I want everybody to notice that as well. And
Yeah.
you mentioned it. You mentioned it, many times, that it's not like you're present and then you're present forever. You're going to have challenges. Most of the time when you try to be present, things are actually harder than, when you're just letting the world, take you over and, pull you around. That's sometimes the easy route now, but the harder route later. And
Oh, yeah.
presence is the harder route now, but it makes everything easier and make kind of unleashes clarity, which is really what we're all looking for. This has been such an impactful conversation. The time, there's no better time to talk about this topic. I think it's something people should revisit throughout the year. But as they go into the holidays, being present with their family, thinking about, I think a lot of people are strategic planning, toward the end of the month to try to close things out on a high note. So thinking about how you manage your time, making sure you're prioritizing the right things that are important for you, and what those transitions could be based off of the past. I think learning lessons from the past are so important. And if you don't learn, from those past situations or things that came up, then it's almost like that time wasn't, worth the squeeze, for example. So, been such an impactful conversation. One of the ways that we like to close out the show is, what does connection mean to you today?
Hmm. Yeah, connection for me is being connected to that deepest, quietest part of myself. That
Mhm.
part that lives in your center, but we rarely ever connect with it because we're so busy, because there's so much noise, because everybody wants something from us. And when we give to ourselves, we actually allow ourselves to connect more with ourselves. So that to me is the ultimate connection, is being connected with myself, and that allows me to then almost be like this container for what I want, and then I draw only the people who are in alignment with that version of me. It's
Mhm.
really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the equivalent of like boundaries, right? If you just say, "Okay, I have boundaries," that's one way to talk about that, is to be so clear on what you want that you're able to easily communicate it to other people, and they respect that or they don't, and that's okay, but you are always true to what you want. And that when you start there, I mean, you just can't go wrong.
Mhm. I love it. Yeah. How can folks connect with you to ask, their biggest questions that they may have after the show?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram at Dina.Cataldo. You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can also listen to my podcast. It's called Be a Better Lawyer Podcast. And even if you're not a lawyer, there's some time management stuff in there. So if this is resonating, you can listen to those podcast episodes.
Absolutely. We'll make sure all of those are in the show notes so people can reach out to you. I've checked out the podcast, and there are a lot of great nuggets outside of being a lawyer. I know many lawyers go toward podcasts like that because it says their name in it. But I think we have a lot to learn from high achievers and folks who are in high stress environments. Dina, thank you so much for joining us, and definitely looking forward to staying connected and continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Greg. This has been such a pleasure. Thanks.